Hello and welcome to Religious Studies 100. This is our third week of classes, and the topic for today's class is generally a number of important concepts that we need to master this semester. One of them is value systems. Now, what is a value system? A simple definition would be simply a hierarchy of things that are important for you, things that you value. So if you want to be rich, what is it that you're going to value? But everything that brings money to you, right? If you want to be healthy, what are you going to value? Everything that will make you healthier, better food, a better diet, exercise. Those are values for you, right? And the closer those things bring you to your goal, the more valuable they are to you. That's what I mean by a hierarchy of values. That's a value system. Now, there are many value systems. I'm going to mention a few of them as examples. So the economic value system, some people want to be rich. So they value whatever makes them wealthier. The health or therapeutic value system, well, some people want to be healthy. So whatever brings them closer to that goal is more valuable for them. What about the aesthetic value system? To be beautiful, to look good. What about the spiritual or moral or religious value system? That's important too, right? For some people. Now, sometimes those value systems will overlap, meaning certain things will be good for all of them. But that's the exception. Let me give you an example. Say you fast 1 day per week. And we don't know why you do that, but when we look at it, it really seems to serve a number of purposes. It may be good for your health, because, maybe fasting occasionally may be a good thing to do. It may be good for your looks if you're trying to lose weight. It may be spiritually good. Fasting in religion has an important role in helping you achieve a higher spirituality. It may be good for your economy. You save money 1 day a week, right? So in that particular case, things overlap. But that's not usually the case. The case is that if you want to achieve your goals within a particular value system, you have to be single-minded about it. So if you want to make lots and lots of money, you will not have time to go and work out at the gym, 5 times per week, and you want to spend your money on expensive diets or in beauty treatments or in plastic surgeries, because that's not good for your economy, right? And if you want to be a really healthy person, well, you're going to have to spend money on, health food stores and organic food, which is more expensive, and special diets, and you're going to go to spas and follow relaxation techniques and all of that, and you don't want to overstress yourself with work, which would bring you more money, but that's not good for your health. So if you want to be single-minded about being healthy, then you're going to have to give up values from other value systems. That's the point. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Let me give you even a more striking example. Let's think of a very religious person. Think of Mother Teresa, Mother Teresa. Right? Was she a beautiful woman? No, thank you. She was ugly. She was very ugly, right? Was she a healthy woman? She was not healthy. I mean, she spent her life taking care of people who were very sick, some of them with contagious diseases. That's not the kind of thing you want to do if you want to be really healthy. I'm sure she missed her aerobics more than once. She didn't do the things that she didn't eat organic, probably. Yeah, she wasn't a very healthy person. So she was, plainly speaking, an old, ugly, unhealthy woman, right? Did she care about it? Did anyone care about it? No, because they weren't expecting to see a Hollywood star in there. Rather, they were seeing a saintly person, a good person, right? So because she wanted to be a good person, she had to give up values that belonged in other value systems. If you want to be a really good-looking person and never had a wrinkle and all of that, you're going to have to go through lots of plastic surgeries, put your health at risk, spend your money. Well, the same thing for that system. You're being single-minded. So for whichever system, value system you are working within, you have to be single-minded if you want to achieve the goals you pursue. Now, for the most part, we all want to be successful in all value systems. We want to be rich, and we want to be beautiful, and we want to be healthy, and we want to be good. And in the end, we're just mediocre. We're not good at anything because we're not single-minded at achieving any goals. You see? Talking about fasting, for example, how many, since we already mentioned fasting, how many of you fast? You fast every day? Not every day? No? At night? Thank you. That's tricky. Okay. Do you fast? No? Never? No more? No? But do you break fast? Do you break fast? You don't break fast? You don't break fast? You don't break fast? Do you break fast or you don't break fast? That's what break fast means, right? To break fast. Now he knows it because he attended this lecture before. So, yeah.
What about religious rituals that involve fasting?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yes. Fasting and all religious rituals, anything that is meant to help you achieve self-perfection, spiritual cleansing, would be part of this spiritual system. But of course, if you practice fasting and sexual abstinence and all those kinds of things that religious people do sometimes, then some people might say you're not being very healthful. That's not very healthy. You're not being very healthy. And the religious person would say that's fine with me because I'm not trying to be very healthy. I'm trying to be something else. Now, in connection with this, there is one value system which seems to have achieved some kind of a supremacy over all of the others in our minds, in the Western mind at least, since the early 20th century. And that's the therapeutic value system. We tend to judge everything by the standards of healthiness, how healthy something is. So you don't want to get too involved with your friend's problems because it is not emotionally healthy. You don't want to give too much money to charities because that's not financially healthy, correct? So we seem to judge everything by its degree of healthiness. We owe that to Sigmund Freud. The psychoanalyst Sigmund Freud, who lived in the latter part of the 19th and early 20th century. He was a pretty anti-religious person. He was pretty hostile to religion, actually. And he thought that religion itself was just a disease of the mind. He called it an obsessional neurosis, a disease of the mind. So religious people were basically diseased people. And when he looked at religious people from the past, these saints, these ascetics, who practiced fasting and self-denial and didn't eat right and didn't have sexual relations and all these kinds of things, well, he said, look, those people are just sick people. Now we know what they are. There's no more mystery to religion. They're just sick people. And he thought that by saying that, he was pretty much giving us the final word on religion. Well, today we view things differently. Those people, he was partially right, may have been sexually repressed, may not have led a healthy lifestyle, therefore they were unhealthy people. Sometimes they were sick people, and that's fine. No problem with that, because they weren't pursuing a life of healthiness, but rather a life of spirituality. So when you want to be a spiritual person, you will have to give up other goods, maybe health, beauty, money. The same as if you want to be a rich person, you probably have to be ready to give up spirituality, because if you want to make money, you're not really going to give large amounts of money to charities or to the needy, because that's bad for your finances. So you get the idea, right? Within each value system, there are goals that will lead you to achieving your objectives. There are, rather than goals, there are things and values that will help you achieve that objective. And each of these value systems are not, and in fact cannot possibly be compatible with other value systems. When we try to make the values of a specific value system supreme and dominant over other value systems, assuming that there is one value system that in itself defines what is good and what is not good, and that therefore all other values that belong in other value systems may be judged by the standards of this particular value system, you are falling into what the British philosopher G. E. Moore called the naturalistic fallacy. The naturalistic fallacy. The naturalistic deceit. The word fallacy means deceit. Let me give you a very simple, very basic example of the naturalistic fallacy. I'm sure you heard the weatherman on TV, the meteorologist, say things like, this coming weekend, we're going to have wonderful weather, beautiful weather, lovely weather. You've heard that before, right? Yes? What does he mean by that? What does he mean by beautiful weather, lovely weather? The what? I'm sorry?
Like a bright sunny day, like it's not gonna rain on our eye.
Right, bright, sunny, warm, right? Now let's say I don't like sunny days. I like the rain, the fog, the cold. What is this guy telling me by saying a beautiful, lovely weather? He's assuming that sunny equals good. Beautiful, lovely, however you want to call it. He's mistakenly assuming that sunny itself is good, and we all agree on that. Sunny, warm means good. Therefore, he can say good weather, lovely weather, great weather, beautiful weather. It turns out that sunny weather and warm weather is not good weather to me. Say someone who lived all his life in the desert. He loves the rain, and he gets really happy when there is this cloudy weather and cold and rainy and foggy. Well, what is this guy telling him? Nothing. So he's basically falling in the naturalistic fallacy. He's assuming that this fact, this existential fact, this descriptive fact has a value attached to itself. In its own nature is good. Now I use the word existential. Let me explain what I mean by that. Remember we said we find these kinds of dichotomies in religion. The dramatic and the tragic, remember that? And I said there are other dichotomies that we find in religion. Well, one of them is a parallel dichotomy would be the essential and the existential. We call existential that which can be seen, described, that which is physical. Do you guys have any existential problems at the moment? What is an existential problem? Yes?
Would it be like stress in school and stuff?
Yes. Being hungry, being thirsty, not having money, all of those are existential problems. They affect your physicality, right? That's an existential matter, something which can be described with words. What would be essential? What would be an essential problem? I would come close, yeah. Depressions, is said. but more in religious terms, if an existential issue or an existential problem is something which affects your physicality, your body, what would be an essential problem? Something which affects your essence. What is your essence in religion? In Western religion, at least. The soul. So what would affect your soul? Thank you, yeah. Something to do with morality. Call it sin, call it whatever you want, okay? So something to do with making a choice between, lying or not lying, stealing or not stealing, doing good or doing evil. Those would be essential matters. So to assume that an existential fact, such as warm weather, sunny weather, is in itself good or bad, that's what we call the naturalistic fallacy. Okay? Many times we make that assumption about things. Oh, that is obviously good. We all agree. Well, maybe not. Things are in themselves indifferent. Things, physical facts, are not good or bad. That's a value we put on them later. If you assume that those things contain a value in themselves, then you're falling into the naturalistic fallacy. Now, this obsession with healthiness has really dominated, as I said, the Western mentality for the past century or so. To the point that some people may be asking, in fact, they are asking, I do have a magazine that says in the cover of it, is religion good for your health? That's what it says. Is religion good for your health? So people are asking that. There's just the plain consequence of being obsessed with healthiness and assuming that healthiness is the supreme value for everything. Is religion good for your health? What do you guys think? Okay, let me ask you the same question in different ways. Is going out to a mission and taking care of lepers and people who are very sick who live out there good for your health? But is it a good thing to do? It may be a good thing to do, right? Is not eating well because you give part of your food to the needy and to the poor good for your health? No. But giving the money to the needy is, or maybe a good thing to do, right? Yeah. So if religion is about helping the needy, about self-sacrifice, about doing things for others at your expense, is religion good for your health? Huh? No, it's like we don't want to say no, because it seems you have to say yes to put religion in a good light, but no. People are maybe obsessed out there trying to prove that religion is good for your health because it makes you feel good, it gives you friends, you have like a group that you meet on Sunday mornings, you do picnics with them, and that's not religion. If religion is something, you can be sure religion is not good for your health. Religion is not a health insurance. Religion is, it may be actually plainly bad for your health. Although, that's not the answer that those magazines I mentioned are trying to find, right? You have a question?
Couldn't you say it's good for your mental health, but not necessarily good?
That's the kind of answer we're trying to find. Good for your mental health. But I'm sorry, it may not even be good for your mental health. Because if you look at the kinds of things that we are being told today by psychologists that are good for your mental health, like a healthy, balanced sexual life, well, religion may conflict with that. So, I mean, I'm sure, again, going to Mother Teresa, she wasn't doing the things that some psychologist here in LA would tell her to do to have a mental healthy life, mental healthy life, okay? Healthy mental life, sorry. So she was probably doing the wrong things on many counts. So I would say religion, if it is true religion, it's not good for your health. Don't try to make it compatible. It's just a different value system. Just come to terms with it. You want to be religious, you want to be religious. It's going to mean giving up a number of things. You want to be healthy, well, then you're going to give up other things. You want to be beautiful, you're going to give up probably your health and your money in order to go through those plastic surgeries and spend your money. As I said, the problem is we try to be good on all value systems. We try to pursue all value systems. We try to be healthy and good and wealthy and beautiful, and in the end we don't achieve anything. We end up being mediocre people for the most part, right? Okay, let me say a few words, since we already talked about science a little bit, about psychoanalysis and Freud. Let me say a few words about the conflict between religion and science. The conflict between religion and science. You got an inkling to this conflict when I talked about Freud and his idea that religious people are simply sick people. There's nothing else to say, they're just sick. But then we say that's a scientific view. Scientific views are existential views, descriptive views of things, but religious people are trying to achieve something else, right? So there is a conflict going on, has been going on for the whole of the 20th century between religion and science. Now, religion and science are two different fields of knowledge and human experience. Science is about the here and now, what we know now, what we can describe now. Religion is about faith and eschatological expectations about the end of it all. And faith in things that we don't know, that we are not capable of understanding currently in our present state of knowledge. Let me give you one example. Let's look, for example, at the field of neurological studies, brain studies. That's an area of conflict for religion and science, because religion says we have a soul, and as a result of having that spiritual soul, we have the capacity to think and reason and do good or evil. Now, for a brain surgeon or for someone in that field, some of them might say, well, when I look at the brain, all I see is blood movements depending on your activities or your thoughts. And when there is a damage to the brain, then your psychic life simply ceases, is damaged. You go crazy, you behave funny, you're not a mentally healthy person anymore. And so our conclusion is, it is your brain that produces your thoughts. There's nothing else but your brain. Well, we don't see our thoughts under the microscope, for one thing. You can put someone's brain under the microscope, and all you will see is blood movements. And you will know that if you stimulate a certain part of the brain, then something will happen, but you don't see the thoughts or the feelings in there. Where are they? We don't see them, okay? So for a scientist in that field to try to give the final word as to whether your thoughts and feelings and what make us human are produced just by your brain, by matter, that's overstepping their field and trying to give final answers to something which we can't really prove. We will never be able to prove. Let me give you an example to illustrate what I mean. Imagine we were able to bring, through some kind of time machine, a guy from the 18th century, a scientifically minded person from the 18th century. You know, the 18th century in Europe was the time of the Enlightenment. There was this dazzlement with science and how science, they knew very little science. They were barely beginning to do science. But they were really dazzled, like science is going to solve all of our problems. We're going to find out the solution to all of our problems, to all of our ills, within a matter of just a few years. And the electricity, they had begun to know about electricity and all these kinds of, oh gosh, electricity will make wonders. And so we bring a guy from the 18th century and we show him a computer like this. not connected to anything, let's say working on batteries, it's just connected to the internet through Wi-Fi. And we get him into a chat room, and he starts chatting with someone who is in Australia, say. And so he has a conversation with this guy, and typing or even voice-wise. What do you think the assumption of this guy would be, this 18th century guy? Well, I'll tell you what his assumption would be. His assumption would be that the computer is talking to him, that we have actually built a brain, a thinking machine. And he would be amazed if you guys have achieved the dream of science, our 18th century dream. You have created a thinking machine, and you can talk to them, and it makes perfect sense, and the machine replies to you back and forth, and now you can have your little friends, as many of them as you want, just buy as many computers as you want, and just talk to one or the other. When you get tired of one, you talk to the other. And that would be his assumption, because right? Now you try to explain to him, no. Look, you're actually talking to someone who's in Australia, on the other side of the world. And what happens is that when you talk, what you say goes up into the stratosphere in the form of invisible waves at an incredible speed, and then down to Australia and back to the stratosphere and then back to... Would he believe that? He'd say, yeah, right. Now, tell me about little angels taking my messages back and forth, right? He wouldn't believe that, because he sees the machine, he's talking to the machine, and when there is a problem with the hardware or the software, he notices that the voice goes wrong, or the things the other guy says don't come out well. Well, the machine gets broken, therefore the thoughts produced by the machine just don't come out well. Like the person, his brain is bad, there's something wrong with the brain, so the person acts funny and talks funny, and that's it. Therefore, it's the brain that produces thoughts. Therefore, it's the machine that's talking to me. Because obviously when the machine goes wrong, something fails here, then the guy doesn't talk right. The words fall apart, or you can't understand what the guy says, speaks funny. Therefore, it's the machine that's talking to me. How can you tell me about these invisible waves going up into the stratosphere, thousands of miles up into the sky, and then down to Australia and back and forth as we talk? Come on, please. I'd rather believe in little angels bringing messages back and forth than what you're telling me. Invisible waves going up and down. Right? And he would be wrong, right? He would be wrong. He doesn't understand the science of, the internet and computer and satellites and all of that. He has no clue of that. Well, what religious thinkers, religious philosophers say, concerning this field of brain studies, if God exists, then our brain may be the ultimate internet. You know what I mean? If the science of 100 years ago is a joke to us, we smile at it, isn't it? I mean, if you had to go through, to have your appendicitis removed, how many of you wouldn't mind having it removed in a 1942 hospital or 1935? State of the art, where the US president had just his appendicitis removed. Would you go into that hospital, 1935, 1940 hospital? State of the art hospital with the president of the US in the room next door to you. Would you want to have your appendicitis removed? It's been we're talking about 60 years ago, only 70 years ago. Well, yesterday's science makes us smile today. We wouldn't even consider going to a 1970s hospital or even 1980s. We look at it like, hey, they weren't as advanced as we are now. We know now things that they didn't know back then, right? Well, imagine what our science will be 100 years from now. What we think to be state-of-the-art science today, imagine how it will be seen 100 years from now, 200 years from now, 1,000 years from now, 2,000 years from now, 5,000 years from now, 100,000 years from now. How can we give the final word on anything, on how the brain works, on whether our thoughts are produced by the brain only, when, as religious thinkers will say, if God exists, our brain, our very body may be the final science. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Yes, no? The same as if this guy from the 18th century comes here, he looks at the computer and he says, hey, the computer is talking to me. The computer is talking to me. But he doesn't understand that what's at work here is a far more advanced science that he can understand. He cannot possibly understand. Because back in the 18th century, there were no computers and no internet and no satellites. Well, apply that same example to what we know today about brain studies, about how our thoughts are produced. Well, our thoughts may be the computers of our brains, may be the computers from a million years from now. So for science to give the final word on that is to overstep its field and into a different field, which would be that of religion. The same as when religion in the past overstepped, invaded the field of science, trying to define things scientifically because the Bible said this or that. Well, that's wrong. Science is about what we know now, not about making predictions or giving final statements, final solutions, final answers to things, but simply what we know now. So all we can say, going back to our example of brain studies, is, well, when we are happy, we see a concentration of blood on this section of the brain, but from there to say, oh, it is the brain that produces the thoughts. That's like for the 18th century man to say, it is the computer that's talking to me. Do you see what I'm trying to say? Do you see the parallel example of both? Okay. However, this is happening. This conflict is happening. We have, as in the past, we had religious people who wanted to give the final word on science, and some scientists were put in prison. You know the story of Galileo, for contradicting what the church said concerning the universe, for example, or the motion of the stars. Well, today we have scientists who, maybe in a more subtle way, try to give us the final word on things, assuming that religious explanations make no sense and shouldn't be taken seriously. Houston Smith is a religionist, you would call him a philosopher of religion, a very important philosopher of religion. Who in his book, Why Religion Matters, states that some scientists have what he calls a scientific agenda, a permanent attempt to disprove religion through scientific findings, which, scientific findings which themselves may be disproved a few years from now. So let's see a little bit more about the brain and our thoughts. Religion is, as I said the first day of classes, a dualistic belief system. Meaning from the religious viewpoint, the Western religious viewpoint, we have body and soul. There is this world and the other world. There is this reality and the unseen reality. I want to talk about two authors who did some experimentation, so to say, with this dualistic view of reality. One is Aldous Huxley. The other one is Carlos Castaneda. Carlos Castaneda. Aldous Huxley is a famous British author of Irish origin. he was very concerned with religion, a 20th century author. I'm talking about mid-20th century author. I will say more about Aldous Huxley later in the semester. He's the author of a book called The Perennial Philosophy, which is an anthology, a collection of mystical texts. He wrote a novel that I'm sure you heard about, Brave New World. And he wanted to experiment with this idea that our brains contain the ultimate channels of communication with this spiritual reality. And there are ways in which we stimulate those channels. And when we stimulate those channels, we have access to this spiritual reality. For example, one way to stimulate those channels is through ascetic practices, not eating, not sleeping, and then you end up having visions. And we can call those visions hallucinations, but by saying hallucinations, we're not really explaining what those visions are. We're just putting a label. But if we were to put a person's brain, someone who's having hallucinations, under the microscope, we wouldn't see hallucinations. What are those visions taking place? Well, another way to stimulate those channels and have us experiment these spiritual effusions and happiness is through alcohol. Have you thought of that? Alcohol as a spiritual drink. Have you thought of that before? Yes? Have you seen the word spirits in liquor stores? Spirits refer to alcohol, to alcoholic beverages, spirits. Have you seen it? It's very common. You go there, see a box of beer or wine, says spirits, alcoholic drinks, spirits. Yes? Well, guess why they were called spirits? Because it was thought to be a spiritual drink. It affected your spirit. It stimulates those ultimate channels. That's why it makes you happy. That's a spiritual experience. Yes, just next time you walk by a liquor store, just look around, you'll see the word spirits in boxes or shelves. Well, the same with drugs. In fact, some Native American Indians use some drugs, peyote for example, in their religious rituals. And they use it for the sake of spiritual experience. And so did Aldous Huxley. He used peyote and he used LSD. He came to California, to Malibu, and he did that. And then he wrote 2 books in which he describes his experiences with these drugs. But not as hallucinations produced by drugs. To call that hallucinations is one way to look at it. But he says, these are spiritual experiences. I actually got out of my body, so to say, and entered a different reality. I opened up these channels in my brain, so to say, these ultimate channels of communication, and entered this reality. He describes what that reality is like. These books are called Heaven and Hell, and most famously, The Doors of Perception. These are very short books, easy to read, very interesting. And he describes the visions he had when using those drugs. Carlos Castaneda is quite a character. He already died. He was a graduate student at UCLA in the anthropology department at UCLA in the 1970s. And he decided to do his doctoral dissertation on Native American witchcraft. And so he went to New Mexico and he got in touch with a sorcerer, an Indian sorcerer, an old Indian sorcerer called Don Juan. Don Juan. Eventually, after he finished his dissertation, he published a book which became very famous, world famous. It really made the guy a celebrity, called The Teachings of Don Juan. Then he would publish many more books. The Teachings of Don Juan. I always thought that's a funny title, Because Don Juan is a romantic character, 19th century romantic character in a Spanish play, very famous play called Don Juan, who's a womanizer. So when you want to tell someone, jokingly tell a guy, hey, you're such a Don Juan, meaning you're such a womanizer, you're always, seducing women and stuff like that. Well, the teachings of Don Juan has nothing to do with teaching you how to seduce women. It has to do with American Indian witchcraft. And so he describes what Don Juan taught him and how all of these rituals had to be performed, these protocols, in a very precise manner. So he had to go, say, at 5 o'clock in the morning at a certain magic spot on this particular mountain next to this tree and close to that river, and there he would ingest peyote, and then he would see the doorkeeper, and then this is what he had to tell the doorkeeper, blah, 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 and then that way he would be safe into entering this reality, and then he would encounter this other being, And he does those things, and he describes those things in his book. Now, Aldous Huxley didn't have the benefit of having a guide, a protocol. So basically what happens with Huxley is that he ingests these drugs, and he's thrown into the horror of this other world without knowing the protocols, without knowing what to do. So you had to get two very different descriptions in there. Now this matches very, very nicely with the idea of the Tibetan Book of the Dead or the Egyptian Book of the Dead, these ancient cultures that had a protocol as to what the person was supposed to do after they died. The protocol they had to follow in order not to fall into this horror, this chaos, or this hell. So, that's Carlos Castaneda. And this is pretty much all I wanted to say for today, unless you have any questions. Any questions or any comments you'd like to make? Yes? Any other questions? You have any other questions? Questions regarding the content of the lecture? Comments? Anything? Okay, well, thank you very much.